The rain hammered against the windows of the silver anchor bar as Maya Chen walked through the heavy wooden doors. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a modest black dress that did nothing to hide the quiet confidence in her stride. The bar was packed with military personnel from the nearby naval base, their voices creating a low rumble that mixed with the classic rock playing from the speakers. Maya had come here not by choice, but out of necessity. Her younger brother Jake had been getting into trouble again, and tonight he had crossed a line that could end his naval career before it truly began. As his emergency contact, she had received the call that every military family dreaded. Jake was in custody for a bar fight that had gone too far, and his commanding officer wanted to speak with family before deciding whether to press formal charges. She spotted Jake immediately, sitting at a corner table with his head in his hands. Even from across the room, she could see the bruises on his knuckles and the shame written across his young face. At 22, Jake was still trying to prove himself in the Navy, still carrying the weight of growing up without their father, who had died in Afghanistan when Jake was just 12. Maya approached the table slowly, her heart breaking at the sight of her baby brother looking so defeated. She had practically raised him after their father's death, working 2 jobs to keep them afloat while their mother struggled with grief and depression. Every sacrifice she had made, every late night working to pay for his education, every moment of pride when he had enlisted, all of it seemed to be crashing down around them. "Jake," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with regret. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I know you told me to stay out of trouble. I know how hard you've worked to help me get here." Before she could respond, a group of men at the bar erupted in laughter. Maya glanced over and noticed they were all wearing Navy uniforms, their posture and bearing suggesting they were special operations. One of them, a tall man with broad shoulders and piercing blue eyes, seemed to be the center of attention. His name tag read Reeves, and the insignia on his uniform marked him as a SEAL team leader. "That's Commander Reeves," Jake whispered, following her gaze. "He's the one who broke up the fight. He's also the one who could make this whole thing disappear if he wanted to." Maya studied the commander from across the room. He had the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it, the kind of quiet authority that came from years of leading men into impossible situations. She had heard stories about SEAL teams, about the brotherhood they shared and the loyalty that bound them together. "What happened, Jake?" she asked, turning her attention back to her brother. Jake's face flushed with embarrassment. There were these guys from another unit talking trash about Dad, saying that Army guys were all talk, that they couldn't handle real combat. I tried to walk away, Maya. I really did. But then one of them said something about Dad being weak, about how he probably got himself killed because he wasn't tough enough. Maya felt her own anger flare at the words, but she kept her expression neutral. She understood Jake's reaction, even if she couldn't condone it. Their father had been a decorated Army Ranger who had died, saving his unit from an improvised explosive device. His sacrifice had been recognized with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, but for Jake, no medal could ever be enough to silence the doubts he carried about living up to his father's legacy. "I couldn't let them talk about him like that," Jake continued, his voice breaking. "So I threw the first punch. But they were bigger than me, and there were more of them. If Commander Reeves hadn't stepped in when he did, I probably would have ended up in the hospital instead of just in trouble." Maya reached across the table and took her brother's hand. "Dad wouldn't want you throwing away your career over something like this." "I know," Jake said quietly, "but I couldn't just stand there and let them dishonor his memory." The sound of approaching footsteps made them both look up. Commander Reeves was walking toward their table, his expression unreadable. Maya felt her pulse quicken, knowing that this man held her brother's future in his hands. "You must be Jake's sister," Reeves said as he reached their table. His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a slight southern drawl that spoke of origins far from the coastal base where they now found themselves. "Maya Chun," she said, standing and extending her hand. "Thank you for stepping in tonight." Reeves shook her hand, his grip firm but not intimidating. Your brother was defending his father's honor. I respect that. But he needs to learn that there are better ways to handle disrespect than with his fists. Yes, sir, Jake said, standing as well. I understand that now. Reeves studied Jake for a moment, then turned his attention back to Maya. I've been reviewing your brother's file. His performance has been exemplary up until tonight. His instructors speak highly of his dedication and his potential. Maya felt a spark of hope. Jake's always been determined to serve with honor, just like our father. Your father, Reeves said, his expression shifting slightly. Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, Army Rangers. Kia in Kandahar Province, October 2015. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't unusual for military personnel to know about decorated soldiers, but the specific way Reeves had recited the information suggested a deeper familiarity. You knew him? She asked. Reeves was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes distant. We served together on a joint operation about 6 months before he was killed. Your father was a good soldier and a good man. The simple words carried more weight than any elaborate eulogy could have. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering how proud their father had been of his service, how he had always spoken with deep respect about the other branches of the military, and the bonds that connected all who served. He would be proud of Jake's service, Maya said quietly. He would be, Reeves agreed. But he would also want his son to be smart about how he defends his legacy. Reeves pulled out a chair and sat down, his manner becoming less formal. Here's what's going to happen. The other unit involved in tonight's incident has agreed not to press charges, provided Jake completes some additional training and community service. He'll also be restricted to base for the next month. Maya felt relief wash over her, but she could see that Reeves wasn't finished. However, he continued, Jake needs to understand that being in the Navy means being part of something bigger than himself. It means learning to control his emotions and channel his passion for service in productive ways. I understand, sir, Jake said earnestly. I won't let you down. Reeves nodded, then stood. I'll be keeping an eye on your progress, Chun. Don't make me regret giving you this second chance. As Reeves turned to leave, Maya felt compelled to say something more. Commander, thank you. Jake is all the family I have left. This opportunity means everything to us. Reeves paused and looked back at her. For just a moment, his professional demeanor softened, and she caught a glimpse of something deeper in his eyes. Family is everything, Miss Chun. Your brother is lucky to have someone who cares about him as much as you do. After Reeves left, Maya and Jake sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing what had just happened. The weight of the evening's events was settling over them, but so was the relief of knowing that Jake's career wasn't over before it had truly begun. You realize how lucky you are, don't you? Maya said finally. Jake nodded, his expression serious. I know, and I know I owe you an apology too. You've sacrificed so much for me, and I almost threw it all away because I couldn't control my temper. Maya reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We all make mistakes, Jake. What matters is what we learn from them. As they prepared to leave the bar, Maya couldn't shake the image of Commander Reeves from her mind. There had been something about the way he had spoken about their father, something that suggested their brief encounter wasn't as random as it had seemed. But she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the gratitude she felt for his intervention and the second chance he had given Jake. The rain had stopped by the time they stepped outside, and the air was crisp and clean. Maya wrapped her coat tighter around herself as they walked toward her car, Jake silent beside her. She knew that this incident would be a turning point for him, a moment that would either break his spirit or forge him into the kind of man their father had been. Maya, Jake said as they reached the car, I want you to know that I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. I'm going to make Dad proud, and I'm going to make you proud too. She smiled at him, remembering the little boy who used to follow her around the house after their father's funeral, looking to her for comfort and guidance. You already make me proud, Jake. Every single day. As they drove home through the quiet streets, Maya found herself thinking about the evening's events and the unexpected intervention of Commander Reeves. She had no way of knowing that their paths would cross again, or that the connection he had mentioned to their father ran much deeper than a single joint operation. All she knew was that her brother had been given a second chance, and that sometimes, when you least expected it, help could come from the most unlikely sources. The next few weeks would bring new challenges as Jake worked to prove himself worthy of the second chance he had been given. But tonight, as they drove through the darkness toward home, Maya allowed herself to feel hope for the first time in months. Her brother's future was still intact, and that was all that mattered. Little did she know that her own future was about to become intertwined with the enigmatic SEAL commander in ways she could never have imagined. The tattoo hidden beneath her modest dress told a story that she had never shared with anyone, a story that would soon connect her past to her present in the most unexpected way. For now, though, she was simply a sister who had fought to protect her brother's dreams, unaware that her own life was about to change forever. The seeds of that change had already been planted in a crowded bar on a rainy night, when two people from different worlds had briefly touched each other's lives in the most ordinary of circumstances. Commander Reeves had recognized something in Maya Chen that night, something beyond her obvious love for her brother. He had seen strength and sacrifice, loyalty and courage. He had also seen something that stirred memories he had buried deep, memories connected to a promise he had made to a dying soldier in a dusty Afghan village years ago. But those revelations would come later. Tonight was about second chances and new beginnings, about the fragile hope that sometimes, just sometimes, the right person appears at exactly the right moment to change everything. As Maya tucked Jake into bed like she had when he was a child, she whispered a quiet thank you to their father, wherever he was watching from. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight her family was safe and her brother's dreams were still alive. The story was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the incident at the Silver Anchor, and Jake Shun was thriving in his naval service. True to his word, he had thrown himself into his duties with renewed dedication, earning commendations from his superiors and the respect of his fellow sailors. Maya watched with pride as her brother transformed from an impulsive young man into a disciplined naval petty officer. It was a crisp autumn morning when Maya received an unexpected phone call at her job at the Veterans Affairs office downtown. She had been working there for 2 years, helping military families navigate the complex bureaucracy of benefits and services. It was meaningful work that allowed her to honor her father's memory while supporting families who had made similar sacrifices. Ms. Chun, this is Captain Morrison from the Naval Special Warfare Command, the voice on the other end said. I was wondering if we could schedule a meeting with you regarding your brother's service record. Maya's heart immediately jumped to her throat. Is Jake in trouble again? No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. Your brother has been recommended for advanced training opportunities, and as part of our standard process, we like to interview family members who have been significant influences in the candidate's life. Relief flooded through Maya, followed quickly by pride. Jake had mentioned that he was being considered for specialized programs, but she hadn't realized how seriously the Navy was taking his potential. Of course, Captain. What would you like to meet? Would this Saturday at 1,400 hours work for you? We can meet at the base conference center. Maya agreed to the meeting, her mind racing with questions about what this could mean for Jake's future. After hanging up, she called her brother to share the news. Maya, this could be huge, Jake said, his excitement evident even over the phone. The programs they're considering me for could set me up for a career in special operations. It's everything Dad would have wanted for me. Saturday arrived gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Maya dressed professionally in a navy blue blazer and skirt, wanted to make a good impression on the officers who would be evaluating her family's suitability for Jake's advancement. She had no idea that the simple choice of outfit would soon become the least important thing about this day. The naval base was bustling with activity when she arrived. Security checked her identification thoroughly before directing her to the conference center, a modern building that served as the administrative heart of the Special Warfare Command. Maya found the correct conference room and, knocked on the door at precisely 2 o'clock. "Come in," called a familiar voice from inside. Maya opened the door and froze. Sitting at the head of the conference table, dressed in his formal Navy uniform with numerous ribbons and medals, was Commander Reeves. Next to him sat Captain Morrison, whom she recognized from photographs in the local military newspaper, along with 2 other officers she didn't know. "Ms. Chun," Commander Reeves said, standing as she entered. His expression was professional but warm. "Thank you for coming today." "Commander," Maya replied, trying to hide her surprise. "I didn't realize you would be part of this interview. I was the one who recommended your brother for advance consideration," Reeves explained, gesturing for her to take a seat across from the panel. "After observing his performance over the past 3 months, I believe he has the potential to serve in specialized capacities." Captain Morrison smiled reassuringly. "This is really just a formality, Ms. Chun. We like to get a complete picture of our candidates, including their family support systems and backgrounds. From everything we've observed, your brother has shown remarkable growth and dedication." The interview began with standard questions about Jake's childhood, his motivation for joining the Navy, and the family dynamics that had shaped his character. Maya found herself talking about their father's influence, the challenges they had faced after his death, and the close bond that had developed between the siblings as they navigated their grief together. "Your father's death clearly had a profound impact on both you and your brother," observed Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, one of the officers Maya didn't recognize. "How do you think that experience shaped Jake's approach to military service?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I think losing Dad so young gave Jake a deep appreciation for the sacrifice that military families make. But it also gave him something to live up to. Our father wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who believed that service meant putting something bigger than yourself first." Commander Reeves leaned forward slightly. "And what about you, Ms. Chun? How did your father's death shape your own perspective on service?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had expected the focus to remain on Jake, not shift to her own experiences. "I suppose it taught me that service takes many forms. I may not wear a uniform, but working with veterans' families has been my way of continuing Dad's legacy." "That's admirable," Captain Morrison said. "The work you do at the VA office is invaluable. Military families need advocates who understand their unique challenges." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering topics ranging from Jake's academic performance to his leadership potential. Maya found herself relaxing as it became clear that this was indeed a positive evaluation rather than any kind of disciplinary proceeding. As the formal interview portion concluded, Captain Morrison and the other officers excused themselves, leaving Maya alone with Commander Reeves. The change in atmosphere was immediate and subtle, the professional distance giving way to something more personal. "Your brother has exceeded every expectation we've set for him," Reeves said, his voice softer now that they were alone. "The incident 3 months ago was actually the making of him. Sometimes people need to face their worst impulses before they can become their best selves." "Jake's always been strong," Maya replied. "He just needed to learn how to channel that strength properly." Reeves nodded, then was quiet for a moment, seeming to wrestle with something internal. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. "Ms. Chun, there's something I need to tell you about your father. Something that goes beyond the brief mention I made at the bar that night." Maya felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" "The joint operation I mentioned, the one where I served alongside your father, it wasn't just any mission. It was a rescue operation in the mountains near Kandahar. Our team had been sent to extract a group of civilians who had been taken hostage by insurgents." Reeves paused, his blue eyes distant as he revisited memories that were clearly still painful. Maya waited, sensing that whatever he was about to tell her was significant. "The mission went wrong from the start," he continued. "Intelligence was faulty, and we walked into an ambush. Half of our combined team was injured in the initial contact, including myself. I took shrapnel to the leg and was bleeding badly." Maya felt her breath catch. Her father had never spoken about the details of his missions, following military protocol about operational security. All she knew was that he had served with distinction and had died saving his unit. "Your father could have left me behind," Reeves said quietly. The primary objective was to reach the hostages, and stopping to help me was endangering the entire mission. But he didn't hesitate. He dragged me to cover, used his own medical supplies to stop my bleeding, and then carried me for 3 miles through hostile territory to the extraction point. Tears pricked at Maya's eyes as she imagined her father making that choice, putting another soldier's life above mission objectives and personal safety. "He saved my life that day," Reeves continued, "and as we waited for the helicopter, he talked about his family. He showed me pictures of you and Jake. He was so proud of you, Maya. He said you were the strongest person he knew, that you were taking care of everything at home so he could serve overseas." Maya felt the tears spilling over now, overwhelmed by this glimpse into her father's final months that she had never expected to receive. "He made me promise something that day," Reeves said, his voice thick with emotion. "He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I would look after his family. At the time, I thought it was just the kind of thing soldiers say when they're scared and far from home. But he was serious. You don't owe us anything," Maya said through her tears. "What happened to Jake at the bar? You're helping him. That was enough." "No, it wasn't," Reeves replied firmly. "I should have found you sooner. I should have checked on you and Jake years ago. I failed to keep my promise to your father, and I've regretted that every day since I learned about his death." Maya wiped her eyes with the tissue that Reeves offered her, trying to process this revelation. The idea that her father had thought about their future even in his final months, that he had tried to ensure they would have someone looking out for them, was both comforting and heartbreaking. "When Jake got in trouble at the bar, and I learned his name, I immediately made the connection," Reeves continued. "Your father's name was on the emergency contact information. I realized that the family I had promised to protect was right there in front of me. Is that why you gave Jake a second chance?" Maya asked. "Partly," Reeves admitted, "but mostly because he deserved it. Your father would have been proud of how Jake handled himself that night. Yes, he made a mistake, but he made it for the right reasons. And when I spoke to him afterward, I could see the same integrity in him that I saw in your father." Maya felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Gratitude for the connection to her father's final months, sadness for the years of struggle they might have avoided if Reeves had found them sooner, and something else she couldn't quite identify when she looked at this man who had carried the weight of a promise for so many years. "There's something else," Reeves said hesitantly. "Your father gave me something before we parted ways that day, something he wanted me to give to his family if anything happened to him." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, weathered envelope with Maya's name written on it in her father's distinctive handwriting. Maya stared at the envelope with trembling hands, afraid to touch it. Her father's final words, written in a moment when he somehow knew he might not make it home. "He wrote this after the mission," Reeves explained, "before he went back out on the patrol where he was killed. He said he had been meaning to write letters to his family for months, but seeing how close he had come to dying that day made him realize he couldn't put it off any longer." With shaking fingers, Maya opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her father's neat handwriting filled the page, and she read through tears that made the words blur together. "My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, it means that I won't be coming home, and that the good man I entrusted with this letter has found you as I asked him to. I need you to know how proud I am of the woman you have become. You have shouldered responsibilities that no young person should have to bear, and you have done it with grace and strength that amazes me every day. I know that my choice to serve has asked much of our family. I know that you have sacrificed your own dreams to help take care of Jake and your mother. I see how hard you work, how much you give of yourself, and I need you to know that your service is just as valuable as any soldier's. Watch over Jake for me. Guide him, but let him find his own path. He has your strength and my stubborn streak, which will either make him a great man or get him into a lot of trouble. I'm counting on you to help him choose the right direction. But, Maya, I also need you to take care of yourself. Don't let your love for our family stop you from building a life of your own. You deserve happiness and love and all the things you've put aside to hold our family together. The man I've asked to deliver this letter is a good soldier and a better man. If you ever need anything at all, I hope you'll let him help. Know that every day I serve here, I carry you and Jake with me. You are my strength and my purpose, and I am so grateful to be your father. All my love. Dad. Maya read the letter twice through her tears, hearing her father's voice in every carefully chosen word. When she finally looked up, she found Reeves watching her with understanding and patience, clearly recognizing the magnitude of what she had just experienced. He knew, she whispered. Somehow, he knew he wasn't coming back. Sometimes soldiers develop an intuition about these things, Reeves said gently. Or maybe he just wanted to make sure his most important words were said while he still had the chance. Maya folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a sense of closure, a connection to him that went beyond memory and grief. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping your promise, for watching over Jake, for bringing me this. I should have done it sooner, Reeves repeated. You did it when we needed it most, Maya replied. And Dad was right about you. You were a good man. As they sat in the quiet conference room, both lost in their own thoughts, Maya realized that this moment marked a turning point in her life. For years, she had carried the weight of her family's future alone, believing that her father's death had left them without protection or guidance. Now she understood that he had tried to provide for them, even in his final moments, that his love had reached across the years to offer them help when they needed it most. She also realized that Commander Reeves was more than just a fellow service member honoring a promise. He was a man who had carried the burden of survival guilt for years, who had wondered if he was worthy of the life that her father had saved. In helping Jake, in finally fulfilling his promise, he was seeking his own kind of redemption. What happens now? Maya asked. Now Jake continues his training and hopefully qualifies for the programs we've discussed, Reeves replied. And now I stop feeling guilty about a promise I thought I had broken. Maya looked at him carefully, seeing past the uniform and the rank to the man beneath. Maybe now you start living the life my father saved, instead of just surviving it. The words hung in the air between them, carrying meaning that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. But as the storm clouds finally opened outside the conference room windows, washing the world clean with their rain, both Maya and Commander Reeves felt something shifting in the space where grief and gratitude intersected. They had no way of knowing that this conversation was setting the stage for events that would test them both in ways they couldn't imagine, or that the past they shared would soon collide with a present that would change everything. For now, it was enough that a promise had been kept, and that two people who had been touched by the same loss had found their way to each other at exactly the right moment. The story was deepening, and the connections that bound them together were stronger than either had realized. 6 weeks after the meeting at the naval base, Maya-chan found herself in an entirely different world. She stood in the grand ballroom of the Marriott Hotel, surrounded by military personnel, their families, and civilian supporters at the annual Navy Relief Society Gala. The event was a significant fundraiser for military families in need, and Maya had been invited as a representative of the Veterans Affairs Office. She felt out of place among the formal evening wear and military dress uniforms, despite having spent considerable time selecting her own outfit. The black evening dress she wore was simple but elegant, with a modest neckline and flowing skirt that made her feel more confident than she had expected. What she couldn't see was how the dress perfectly complemented her graceful posture and quiet strength, or how several people in the room had already noticed the young woman who moved with such purposeful dignity. Maya was standing near the silent auction tables, examining items donated for the fundraiser, when she heard familiar voices approaching. She turned to see Jake walking toward her, looking sharp in his dress blues, accompanied by several of his fellow sailors. Her brother had grown more confident in recent weeks, his posture straighter and his smile more frequent as his naval career continued to flourish. "Maya," Jake called out, his voice carrying genuine excitement. "I want you to meet some of the guys from my unit." As Jake introduced her to his colleagues, Maya felt the warmth of belonging to this extended military family. These young men and women spoke about her brother with respect and affection, sharing stories of his dedication and the leadership qualities he was developing. For Maya, who had worried about Jake for so many years, hearing these testimonials felt like watching a flower finally bloom after a long winter. "Your brother talks about you constantly," said Petty Officer Rodriguez, a friendly young woman with bright eyes and an easy smile. "He's always saying how you put your own life on hold to help him succeed." Maya felt herself blushing. "Jake exaggerates. I just did what any sister would do." "Not every sister would do what you did," Rodriguez replied seriously. "My own family wasn't nearly as supportive when I enlisted. You should be proud of what you've both accomplished." As the evening progressed, Maya found herself relaxing and enjoying the company. She had spent so many years focused on work and family responsibilities that she had forgotten how good it felt to dress up and participate in social events. The gala was elegant but not stuffy, with military humor and camaraderie keeping the atmosphere light despite the formal setting. It was during the dinner portion of the evening that Maya first noticed the whispered conversations at nearby tables. She was seated with Jake and his unit at a table near the front of the ballroom, giving them a clear view of the head table where senior officers and distinguished guests were seated. Commander Reeves was there, she noticed, looking imposing in his dress uniform with its array of ribbons and medals. "Can you believe Lieutenant Morrison brought her here?" Maya heard someone whisper at the table behind her. "I heard she's been sleeping with half the officers on base," came another voice. "That's how she got her promotion so fast." Maya tried to ignore the conversation, but the cruel tone made it difficult to focus on her own table's discussion about Jake's upcoming training opportunities. "She thinks she's so much better than everyone else," the first voice continued, "acting all professional when everyone knows what she really is." "Someone should put her in her place," agreed another person. "These women who use their looks to get ahead make it harder for the rest of us who actually work for our positions." Maya turned slightly to see who they were discussing and spotted a young woman in a Navy uniform sitting alone at a table near the back of the room. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison looked to be in her late 20s, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation style, and a face that would have been pretty if not for the obvious discomfort written across her features. She was clearly aware of the negative attention she was receiving, her cheeks flushed and her hands fidgeting with her napkin. The whispered commentary continued throughout dinner, growing bolder and more vicious as the speakers apparently assumed their voices were lost in the general noise of the event. Maya found herself increasingly disturbed by the casual cruelty being directed at the young officer, who appeared to be guilty of nothing more than being attractive and successful in a male-dominated environment. "I bet she's never seen real combat," came another whisper. "Probably got all her experience on her back." Maya felt her anger rising, but Jake caught her arm as she started to turn around. "Don't," he whispered. "Those are senior personnel wives. Getting involved won't help anyone." But Maya's sense of justice, honed by years of advocating for veterans' families who couldn't advocate for themselves, wouldn't allow her to remain silent. She had seen too much real sacrifice and genuine service to tolerate this kind of petty meanness. The breaking point came during the keynote speech, when Admiral Peterson was discussing the importance of recognizing all forms of military service. Lieutenant Morrison had been selected to present the evening's service award to a retired sergeant who had spent decades helping military families transition to civilian life. As Morrison walked to the podium, the whispers behind Maya became audibly malicious. "Look at her trying to act important," someone said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Bet she practiced that walk in the mirror. Probably promised the Admiral special favors to get chosen for this," came another voice. Maya watched as Lieutenant Morrison's professional composure began to crack. The young officer's hands were shaking slightly as she reached the podium, and Maya could see the hurt and humiliation in her eyes even from across the room. That was when Maya had heard enough. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor in a way that drew attention from several nearby tables. "Excuse me," she said, turning to face the group behind her with a voice that carried clearly in the momentary lull of the Admiral's speech. "But I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about Lieutenant Morrison." The three women and two men at the table looked startled, clearly not expecting to be confronted. Maya recognized one of them as the wife of a high-ranking officer, her dress and jewelry suggesting significant wealth and social position. "I'm not sure what you think you heard," the woman said haughtily, "but this is really none of your business." "You're right," Maya replied, keeping her voice level but allowing her anger to show through. "Your petty gossip and cruel speculation about a fellow service member is none of my business. But basic human decency is everyone's business." The table fell silent, and Maya was aware that their exchange was drawing attention from the surrounding area. At the podium, Lieutenant Morrison had paused in her presentation, clearly aware that something was happening in the audience. "That young woman," Maya continued, gesturing toward Morrison, "is wearing the uniform of the United States Navy. She has earned the right to be here through her service and dedication. Whatever personal issues you have with her, whatever jealousy or insecurity is driving your behavior, you have no right to attack her character based on nothing but speculation and spite." "How dare you?" the officer's wife sputtered. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Maya replied firmly. "You're someone who has forgotten that the uniform your husband wears represents honor and integrity, values that should extend to how military families treat each other." The confrontation was drawing more attention now, with nearby tables beginning to murmur and crane their necks to see what was happening. Maya was dimly aware that she was creating a scene at a formal military event, potentially embarrassing Jake and drawing negative attention to herself. But she couldn't bring herself to care about those consequences when faced with such casual cruelty. "Lieutenant Morrison has served with distinction," Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "She has earned her rank and her position through merit, not through whatever sordid fantasies you've concocted. The fact that you would spread such poison at an event designed to honor military service shows a complete lack of character and respect for the institution your husband serves." At the podium, Admiral Peterson had noticed the disturbance and paused his introduction of the evening's award recipient. The ballroom was falling quiet as more people became aware of the confrontation taking place. It was at this moment that Commander Reeves rose from the head table and began walking toward the disturbance. Maya saw him approaching and felt a moment of panic, realizing that she had just created a major incident at a high-profile military event. But before Reeves could reach their table, Lieutenant Morrison herself stepped down from the podium and walked directly toward Maya. The young officer's face was flushed, but her bearing was proud and determined. "Thank you," Morrison said simply, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent ballroom. "But I can defend myself." She turned to face the table that had been gossiping about her, her voice steady and professional despite the obvious emotion behind her words. "I have served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq," Morrison said clearly. "I have earned 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. I have led troops in combat and brought them home safely. I have bled for this country and sacrificed years of my life in its service." The table that had been so vocal in their criticism now sat in stunned silence, clearly not expecting this direct confrontation. "If you have questions about my qualifications or my character," Morrison continued, "I invite you to review my service record, which is a matter of public record. If you have concerns about my conduct, I encourage you to file formal complaints through the appropriate channels. But I will not tolerate having my honor questioned by people who have never faced enemy fire or made the sacrifices that military service demands." The ballroom was completely silent now, all attention focused on the young lieutenant, who had transformed from a target of gossip into a powerful advocate for her own dignity. And Morrison added, turning to look at Maya with genuine gratitude, "I want to thank Ms. Chun for reminding us all that standing up for what's right is everyone's responsibility, regardless of rank or position." It was at this point that Admiral Peterson stepped down from the podium and approached the group. Maya felt her heart sink, certain that she was about to be ejected from the event, and that Jake would face consequences for her actions. "Ms. Chun," the Admiral said, his voice carrying authority but not anger, "I believe you work with veterans' families at the VA office downtown." "Yes, sir," Maya replied, bracing herself for the reprimand she was certain was coming. Instead, the Admiral smiled. "Your reputation for advocacy precedes you. Several of my colleagues have mentioned your work helping military families navigate the benefit system." Maya felt confused by the unexpected praise, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Lieutenant Morrison," the Admiral continued, turning to address the young officer, "your response just now was exactly what I would expect from someone with your service record. You have represented yourself and the Navy with distinction." He then turned to address the table that had been the source of the gossip, his expression stern. "As for the rest of you, I trust that this incident will serve as a reminder about the conduct expected at Navy events. We are here to honor service and sacrifice, not to tear down fellow members of our military family." The chastened group at the table nodded silently, their earlier bravado completely deflated by the public confrontation and official disapproval. Admiral Peterson then did something that surprised everyone in the room. He began to applaud, a slow, deliberate clapping that was quickly joined by other service members throughout the ballroom. Within moments, the entire room was giving Lieutenant Morrison a standing ovation, recognizing not just her service record, but her courage in defending her own honor. Maya found herself applauding as well, tears in her eyes as she watched the young officer stand tall despite the emotional toll of the evening's events. She had acted on instinct, unable to tolerate the casual cruelty she had witnessed, but the outcome had been far better than she had dared to hope. As the applause died down and the evening's program resumed, Maya felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Commander Reeves standing beside her, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Chun," he said quietly, "might I have a word with you?" Maya's heart sank again, certain that despite the Admiral's public support, she was about to receive a private reprimand for her behavior. She followed Reeves to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd that was gradually returning to their normal conversations. "That was either very brave or very foolish," Reeves said, his tone neutral. "Probably both," Maya admitted, suddenly feeling the weight of what she had done. "I know I shouldn't have made a scene, but I couldn't just sit there and listen to them tear that woman apart." "Lieutenant Morrison has been dealing with that kind of treatment for months," Reeves said, "ever since she received a rapid promotion based on her combat performance. Some people have difficulty accepting that a young, attractive woman could earn advancement through merit alone." "That's exactly why someone needed to speak up," Maya replied. "If we don't challenge that kind of thinking, it just continues." Reeves studied her for a moment, and Maya was surprised to see what looked like admiration in his eyes. "Your father would have been proud of what you did tonight," he said quietly. "He never could stand bullies either, regardless of their rank or position." The comparison to her father caught Maya off guard, touching a part of her heart that was still tender from reading his letter weeks earlier. "I probably embarrassed Jake," she said, suddenly, worried about the consequences for her brother. "Jake looked proud as hell," Reeves replied with a slight smile. "And Lieutenant Morrison gained an advocate she didn't know she needed." As they talked, Maya became aware that other people at the gala were approaching to introduce themselves and express support for her actions. Military families, fellow advocates, and even some of the senior officers made a point of speaking with her, sharing stories of similar situations they had witnessed and expressing gratitude for her willingness to speak up. Lieutenant Morrison herself eventually approached, her professional composure restored, but her gratitude evident. "I wanted to thank you properly," Morrison said. What you did took real courage. I've been dealing with those whispers for months, but I never knew how to address them without looking defensive. You shouldn't have had to address them at all, Maya replied. Your service record speaks for itself. It does now, Morrison said with a genuine smile. Thanks to you, everyone in this room knows exactly what I've accomplished. That's worth more than you know. As the evening wound down, Maya reflected on how dramatically the night had unfolded compared to her expectations. She had come to support Jake and represent her office at a routine fundraising event. Instead, she had found herself at the center of a confrontation that had ultimately become a powerful statement about integrity, courage, and the responsibility to stand up for what's right. Walking to the parking lot with Jake and his friends, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in having taken a stand, worry about potential consequences, and a growing awareness that her actions tonight had revealed something about herself that she hadn't fully recognized before. Maya, Jake said as they reached her car, I need you to know how proud I am to be your brother. What you did in there, standing up for someone you didn't even know, that's who you've always been. That's why I've always looked up to you. His words brought tears to her eyes, reminding her of all the years they had supported each other through difficult times. We look out for each other, she replied simply. That's what family does. But as she drove home through the quiet streets, Maya knew that something had shifted for her tonight. For years, she had focused on taking care of her family and helping veterans through her work, but she had always done so quietly behind the scenes. Tonight, she had stepped into the spotlight and discovered that she had a voice that could make a difference. She thought about Commander Reeves' words, about how her father would have been proud, and felt a connection to his legacy that went beyond memory and loss. She was beginning to understand that honoring his sacrifice meant more than just taking care of Jake and keeping their family together. It meant standing up for the values he had died defending, regardless of the personal cost. Little did she know that her actions that night had been witnessed by people who would remember her courage, or that the connection she was forming would soon lead to opportunities and challenges that would test her in ways she couldn't imagine. For now, it was enough that she had discovered something powerful about herself and had made a difference in someone else's life. The story was building toward revelations that would change everything, but tonight had been about finding the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it meant standing alone. And Maya Chun had proven that she possessed that strength in abundance. 2 months after the Navy Gala, Maya Chun was settling into her new role as a liaison between the Veterans Affairs Office and the Naval Special Warfare Command. The position had been offered to her following the attention her advocacy work had received at the fundraising event, and it allowed her to use her experience helping military families while working more closely with active duty personnel. It was a humid Tuesday morning in late spring when Maya arrived at the naval base for what she expected to be a routine meeting about family support services. The conference room was filled with personnel from various departments, including several faces she recognized from the gala months earlier. Commander Reeves was there as well, his presence a reassuring constant in her expanding professional world. The meeting progressed normally through discussions of program improvements and resource allocation until Admiral Peterson entered the room with an urgent expression that immediately changed the atmosphere. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a developing situation, the Admiral announced without preamble. One of our SEAL teams operating in the South China Sea has encountered significant resistance during a rescue operation. Team Bravo is requesting immediate backup, and we're activating emergency protocols. Maya felt her heart rate spike as she realized she was witnessing the kind of crisis that defined military life. Around the table, the relaxed posture of the meeting participants transformed into the focused intensity of professionals responding to a crisis. Commander Reeves, Admiral Peterson continued, your team is being activated for immediate deployment. We have American civilians being held on a cargo vessel that's been seized by hostile forces, and Team Bravo is currently engaged, but outnumbered. Maya watched as Reeves processed the information with the calm efficiency of someone who had faced such situations countless times before. She had heard about his reputation as one of the Navy's most experienced SEAL commanders, but witnessing him transition from meeting participant to combat leader was both impressive and sobering. "What's our timeline?" Reeves asked, his voice steady and professional. "Wheels up in 3 hours," the Admiral replied. "Full briefing in the Situation Room in 15 minutes. As the meeting dissolved into urgent preparations, Maya found herself feeling helpless and out of place. This was the reality of military life that families lived with constantly, the knowledge that everything could change in an instant based on events happening thousands of miles away. Commander Reeves approached her as others filed out of the room. "Ms. Chun, I want you to know that the family support protocols we discussed today may be put to immediate use. There are families here on base who will need assistance while their loved ones are deployed." Maya nodded, understanding that her role was shifting from theoretical planning to practical support. "Of course, whatever you need." Reeves paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal before speaking again. "There's something I want you to know, in case things go badly out there." The gravity in his voice made Maya's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Don't talk like that. You're coming back safely." "I plan to," Reeves replied with a slight smile. "But this job doesn't come with guarantees. I wanted you to know that meeting you, fulfilling that promise to your father, it's been one of the most meaningful things in my life." Maya felt tears threatening as she realized how much this man had come to mean to her over the past months. What had begun as a chance encounter at a bar had evolved into something deeper, a connection built on shared loss, mutual respect, and growing affection that neither had fully acknowledged until this moment. "Come back safe," she said quietly. "Jake still needs a mentor, and I—" She paused, unable to finish the sentence. "I know," Reeves said gently. "I feel it too." With that, he was gone, swept away by the urgent demands of mission preparation. Maya was left standing in the empty conference room, confronting emotions she had been avoiding and fear she had never expected to feel. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Maya threw herself into coordinating support for the families of the deployed team members, helping arrange childcare, providing updates when possible, and offering the kind of practical assistance that helped people cope with the uncertainty of having loved ones in danger. It was late afternoon when Lieutenant Morrison found her in the family readiness room, surrounded by files and phone lists as she worked to ensure every family had the support they needed. "Maya," Morrison said softly, "there's been an update." The tone of her voice made Maya's blood run cold. She looked up from her paperwork to see an expression of concern and sympathy that made her worst fears seem suddenly real. "What happened?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The rescue mission was successful," Morrison began, and Maya felt a moment of relief before the lieutenant continued. "All hostages were recovered safely, and both SEAL teams are returning to base. But there were casualties." Maya's hands began to shake as she waited for the information that would either devastate her or allow her to breathe again. "Commander Reeves was injured during the final phase of the operation," Morrison continued. "He took multiple rounds while providing cover for the hostage extraction. He's alive, but he's been evacuated to the Naval Hospital in Germany for emergency surgery." The room seemed to tilt around Maya as she processed the information. Alive, but injured badly enough to require immediate evacuation to Germany meant serious wounds, life-threatening complications, an uncertain outcome. "How bad?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "I don't have detailed medical information," Morrison replied honestly. "But the fact that they're flying him to Germany suggests significant trauma. The good news is that he was conscious when they evacuated him, and he was asking about his team." Maya felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. In the space of a few hours, she had discovered the depth of her feelings for Commander Reeves and faced the possibility of losing him before either of them had fully acknowledged what was developing between them. "There's something else," Morrison said gently. Before he was evacuated, Commander Reeves asked specifically that you be notified. He wanted you to know that he kept his promise to your father. The reference to her father in what might have been Reeves' final message broke something loose inside Maya. She found herself sobbing in a way she hadn't since the day they received word of her father's death, grieving not just for what she might lose, but for what she was only now realizing she had found. Lieutenant Morrison sat with her in silence for several minutes, offering the kind of quiet support that required no words. When Maya finally composed herself, she found a steely determination replacing her despair. "I need to see him," she said firmly. "Maya, he's in Germany receiving medical treatment. Civilian family members don't have access to military medical facilities overseas." "I'm not civilian family," Maya replied, her mind working quickly through the possibilities. "I'm a VA liaison with security clearance, working on family support coordination. There has to be a way." Morrison looked doubtful, but she could see the determination in Maya's eyes. "Let me make some calls." Over the next 24 hours, Maya discovered exactly how much influence her recent advocacy work had generated. Calls were made, favors were called in, and strings were pulled by people who respected what she had done for military families. Admiral Peterson himself intervened to arrange special transportation for her as part of a family support evaluation team traveling to assess overseas medical facilities. The flight to Germany felt endless, every mile taking her further from the familiar world she knew and closer to an uncertain future. Maya had never traveled internationally before, had never flown on a military transport, had never faced the prospect of confronting someone else's mortality in such an immediate way. The Naval Hospital in Germany was a sprawling complex that served wounded service members from throughout Europe and the Middle East. Maya was processed through security and briefed on patient privacy protocols before being escorted to the intensive care unit where Commander Reeves was being treated. Nothing could have prepared her for seeing him unconscious and connected to machines that monitored his vital signs and assisted his breathing. The strong, confident man who had commanded respect and projected authority was reduced to a pale figure surrounded by the technological apparatus of modern medicine. "He's stable," the attending physician explained to Maya as they stood outside his room. "The surgery went well, and we've managed to repair the most critical damage. But he's lost a lot of blood, and there was significant trauma to his abdomen and left leg." "Will he recover fully?" Maya asked. "It's too early to say with certainty," the doctor replied honestly. "The next 48 hours are critical. But he's strong, and he's fighting. Sometimes that makes all the difference." Maya was given permission to sit with him for short periods throughout the day, talking quietly to his unconscious form and hoping that somehow her presence might help anchor him to consciousness. She told him about Jake's continued success, about the family she had been helping, about anything that might remind him that he had reasons to fight his way back. It was on the second day, during her afternoon visit, that she noticed his eyes beginning to flutter. Maya leaned forward, holding her breath as she watched him struggle toward consciousness. "Hey," she said softly when his eyes finally opened and focused on her face. "Welcome back." Reeves tried to speak, but found his throat too dry from the intubation. Maya offered him ice chips and waited patiently as he gathered his strength. "Maya," he finally managed, his voice rough and weak. "What are you doing here?" "Someone had to make sure you kept your promise to my father," she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the tears in her eyes. "You said you'd look after us, but you can't do that if you go and get yourself killed." A weak smile crossed his face. "Always practical. Always terrified," she corrected. "I just hide it better than most people." Over the next few days, as Reeves slowly regained his strength, they talked more honestly than they ever had before. The brush with mortality had stripped away the professional distance and careful politeness that had characterized their previous interactions, leaving them free to acknowledge feelings that had been building for months. "I've been thinking about your father's letter," Reeves said during one of their longer conversations. "About what he said regarding taking care of yourself and building your own life. That's not why I came here, Maya replied quickly. I know, Reeves said gently, but I think it's why I'm glad you did. It was during his final day in the German hospital, as they prepared for his transport back to the United States, that the moment occurred that would change everything between them. Maya was helping him gather his personal effects when she reached for a book that had fallen behind his bedside table. As she bent to retrieve it, the neckline of her blouse shifted, and for the first time, Reeves caught a glimpse of the tattoo that ran along her spine. He froze completely, his face going pale in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. Maya, he said, his voice strange and strained. Turn around. Confused by his sudden change in demeanor, Maya straightened and turned to face him. What's wrong? The tattoo on your back, he said slowly. What does it say? Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The tattoo was something she had gotten years ago in a moment of grief-stricken rebellion, and she rarely thought about it anymore. It was positioned along her spine where she couldn't see it herself, and she had never mentioned it to anyone. It's just something I got after Dad died, she said quietly. It's his dog tag information. Name, serial number, the date he was killed. Reeves was staring at her with an expression she couldn't interpret, something between shock and recognition. Maya, he said carefully. What was your father's full name? Michael David Chun, she replied, confused by the question. Why? Reeves closed his eyes and leaned back against his pillow, his breathing becoming shallow in a way that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. The day I was wounded, the day your father saved my life, he said slowly, he didn't just drag me to safety. While we were waiting for extraction, he was hit by sniper fire. He was bleeding badly, and he knew he wasn't going to make it. Maya felt the world tilt around her as she began to understand what he was trying to tell her. He made me promise to look after you, and Jake, Reeves continued, but he also asked me to do something else. He asked me to memorize his dog tag information, to carry his memory with me always. He said that if he died, at least someone would remember exactly who he was and what he had sacrificed. Maya sank into the chair beside his bed, overwhelmed by the implications of what she was hearing. Michael David Chun, Reeves recited from memory. On 23-45-6789. Blood type O negative. Date of birth March 15th, 1975. Killed in action October 23rd, 2015. The exact information that was tattooed along Maya's spine. The memorial she had carved in her own body without ever knowing that someone else was carrying the same burden of memory. You've been carrying his dog tag information in your memory for all these years. Maya asked through her tears. Every day, Reeves replied. It was the last thing he asked of me. I thought I was the only one who would remember those details. Maya stood and turned around, lifting her hair and pulling down the neckline of her blouse to reveal the delicate script that ran along her spine. The numbers and letters that had been etched into her skin in a moment of desperate grief. Her own way of ensuring that her father's sacrifice would never be forgotten. When Reeves saw the tattoo, he reached out with trembling fingers to trace the familiar words that he had carried in his heart for so many years. He's been connecting us all along, Maya whispered, understanding finally that their meeting had been about much more than coincidence or duty. From the very beginning, Reeves agreed, his voice thick with emotion. As they sat together in that German hospital room, both carrying the same memorial in different forms, Maya and Reeves realized that their connection ran deeper than either had imagined. Her father's love had reached across the years to bring them together, his final requests creating bonds that neither could have anticipated. The humiliation she had felt at the Navy Gala, the moment when strangers had tried to tear down her dignity, had been the catalyst that brought her into Reeves' world. But it was this revelation, this shared burden of memory and loss, that sealed their connection in a way that transcended duty or attraction. When they returned to the United States, it would be as two people who understood that some promises are kept in ways the promiser never intended, and that love sometimes grows from the soil of shared grief into something beautiful and lasting. Maya's father had asked Reeves to look after his family, but in the end, he had given them something much more precious than protection. He had given them each other, and the understanding that his sacrifice had created not just loss, but the possibility of new life, new love, and new purpose. The tattoo along Maya's spine would never again be just a memorial to the dead. It would be a reminder that love transcends death, that promises kept can create unexpected miracles, and that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the crucible of shared service and sacrifice. Their story was far from over, but in that moment of revelation, both Maya and Commander Reeves understood that they were no longer carrying their burdens alone. They had found each other across the vast geography of loss and duty, guided by the love of a man who had seen the future even as he faced his own mortality. The promise had been kept in ways none of them could have imagined. And from that keeping, something beautiful and lasting had been born.